It is Wednesday, the 27th of April, 2016. I am Robin Yellow, and this is Techtasm episode 12. We finally got a guest. And with me, master interviewer, Mr. James Woodall.
Mr. Robin Yellow, how are you doing this evening?
I'm really looking forward to your interview that you will be later in the show, James. I'm very excited about it.
Good stuff.
And this week, James, you and I are going to be looking at some news from Shell, NASA. We're going to be talking about comedy adverts. And James talks to an Oscar winner, kind of. Now, we'll be judging each of the stories we talk about today to determine if they are techtasms, by which our definitions are a blend of tech for technology and tasm for phantasm. Something exists only in a person's mind. So without further intro, let's get on with the show. Reuters reported this week that Shell has produced a design for an electric bandwagon with a petrol-powered concept car. They've actually produced a fully working prototype. Now, you can't see the picture of this car. This vehicle looks like a little... in fact, it looks very similar to the Rosa, the car that we talked about on last week's show. It's two-in-line. It's very light. It's 500 kilos, and it can do 110 miles to the gallon. Now, that's an incredibly good performance, and obviously the reason why Shell have sponsored this design is actually in cooperation or in collaboration with a Formula One company I read here somewhere in the article. Oh, I can't see it now. But their Vice President of Lubricant Technology at Shell, Andrew Heffer, said that the project was aiming just to see how good we could be with something that we manufactured today. Now, obviously, you know, being able to do 110 miles to the gallon is very good, isn't it, James?
It's fantastic. And it doesn't surprise me that an oil company is building a petrol-powered car just to kind of wave the flag and say, hey, we're still here. Very interesting. 110 miles to the gallon is fantastic, but this is not the future. Or am I missing something? Has there been...
Well, I don't know. Is it the future or isn't it? I mean, I've been saying for quite a long time that we should be making less journeys in smaller cars. Maybe this is the smaller car side of it. It's interesting that it has taken an electric car revolution to stimulate somebody to actually produce an efficient, small, petrol-powered car.
But petrol is running out. I mean, I don't know the exact estimates. I'm guessing you're closer to that.
100 years. 100 years.
100 years?
Yeah.
No, come on, that's too long.
Yes, 100 years. Take it from me, it's 100 years.
Okay, well, I don't have
But you've got to remember that we don't just use oil for burning petrol. We also use it for producing chemicals, a very good feedstock for chemical production. And you could argue that for a modern society, that's a much better use of oil.
Well, this is very true. I don't know. It just seems a bit silly that you are seeing a couple of these oil companies getting into solar a lot and whatever. And I don't know. It seems a bit of a strange story, really.
It is. Well, do you know, interesting enough, the oil companies, as far as I can see, are pulling out of solar. You know, I think they're turning back into oil companies again and saying, well, look, you know, there's still 100 years of oil left. Somebody's got to dig the oil out of the ground, you know, and it might as well be us. Let's see if we can't spin out the petrol market for as long as we possibly can by showing the industry that it's possible to make very efficient, small petrol-powered cars.
Okay.
Interesting enough, Sorry, James, go ahead.
No, I was just about to ask. I'm not sure what the question is. What's the
Does the future, do you think a big part, given that I just told you it has 100 years of oil,
yeah.
Do you think the future, a lot of people are going to be driving around in these small, odd-looking, hypermiling vehicles? Or no?
No, definitely not. And that because oil might have 100 years left or whatever, but the trend has to be not doing that. So I think it's admirable. I think this might help petrol cars stay alive for a little bit longer, but it's definitely not the future. We're going to see more and more electric cars on the road, 100%.
There you go. So it's a big techtasm from James. Thank you.
So Engadget, John Fingus in Engadget,
John Fingers.
John Fingas. That's G-A-S.
We should start giving out the Twitter handle, shouldn't we? He's at Jon John Fingers, Jonfingas. We should start doing that.
We should.
From this point, don't worry, I'll edit this bit out. Carry on.
Stop for a bit. All right, I'm going to start again. Engadget this week by John Fingas has written a really interesting article that highlights that NASA is going to be investing $67 million into solar electric spacecraft engines.
Does such a thing even exist?
Well, no. But I guess that's why they're investing. They're investing in it. That's just really, that's completely crazy. I mean, we've heard a lot of things from NASA over the past couple of years with different ways of, like ion propulsing rockets and all that kind of stuff. But that's really, really interesting. What I find strange about this, though, is $67 million is not actually a lot of money compared to what they spend on. I mean, one space flight from SpaceX, I think, is it $60 or $80 million. So, really? I mean, I don't know. It's a really strange story. What do you think?
How does it even work? How does a solar electric propulsion system even work? Because they talk about this thing called the Dawn spacecraft in the article, and they said that uses it.
Yeah, I look. I'm not a space guy, but it seems a little bit far fetched, doesn't it? I mean, look, I get they need to invest in new things and whatever, but I don't know. I think maybe this is a headline grabber, or I don't know. It's a really strange.
Well, I would have thought a good proportion of what they do in NASA, it probably falls into that category of PR stunts. And $67 million, well, on the face of it, sounds like quite a lot of money, I suppose, if you're buying a house. Yeah. But I suppose in terms of NASA's total budget, it might not be a lot of money. So maybe it comes from their Wild and Wacky fund.
I mean, that's definitely possible. Look, they need to be looking at other things, and with the whole deep space concept, going to Mars and so forth, they do need to look at lots of different ways of powering spacecraft. But I just don't. I
love the idea of solar electric propulsion, don't you? I mean, it sounds fantastic. I thought, according to the laws of physics, and I might not really understand what I'm talking about here, that in order to provide forward propulsion, you had to give some thrust, equal and opposite force and all that. And therefore, there must be, this solar electric propulsion system must use some kind of fuel. Maybe it's, a pint of water will go a million miles, I don't know. Yeah. But presumably they're just using electricity to shoot particles out the back at very high speed. So while there isn't actually a lot of mass, it's going very fast, and therefore provides the thrust in that way.
That certainly makes a lot of sense. And but if you are dealing with some kind of fuel or some kind of matter that you have to push out, the whole solar thing, it means it can't last forever, right? Because, well,
why? Because it'll run out of sun power.
No, it'll run out of whatever it is it's using to push itself forward. Let's say the solar is powering the engine that has the fuel or whatever, that's going to run out at some point. Surely.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't know.
It looks like a load of old rubbish to me. I think you called it right there, James, when you said it was probably some kind of PR stunt.
Yeah, so are we saying Techtasm?
It's got Techtasm stamped all over it. The article could have been called, "Listen to this Techtasm, NASA pours $67 million into solar electric spacecraft engines."
Well, for all we know, they could have called it that before changing it to that. So,
Indeed. And by the way, that fluff at the beginning of the article, I'm not going to edit it out after all. I'm going to leave it in for comedy effect. Talking of comedy, the Daily Mail, the Mail Online, everyone's favourite online publication. Literally, it is everyone's favourite online publication. It's the biggest newspaper website in the world. Reported this week that Saturday Night Live, that's the American TV comedy show, is going to start running branded sketches to cut ad breaks by 30%. And this is obviously because TV networks are battling to compete with ad-free online content. Now, what they're going to do is they're going to these 2 commercial breaks per episode will be actually sponsored and performed by the actors in the show. So I don't know if have you ever seen Saturday Night Live?
I have,
James?
yeah, when I've been in the States. And I have to say, commercial breaks in the US are ridiculous. They go on for a long time. I mean, a 30-minute show is 22 minutes. It's just completely ridiculous. It's, when Family Guy used to be on BBC Three, obviously I missed BBC Three, they could squeeze 3 episodes in an hour. Brilliant. It just, the US needs...
Well, apparently Friends, when it was at its height, was less than 20 minutes of content per 30 minutes. So that's 50% commercials. The example they show here, there's a photograph from Saturday Night Live, shows clearly a comedian, a comic actor of some description. You can tell from the facial contortions, holding up a can of Pepsi, and he's clearly making some ironic statement. So presumably there's some kind of performed by the people on the show doing a skit or a show which features a product at the heart of it. Now, James, you're not new to TV. You'll know that product placement has certainly been a big thing in the United States for a long, long time. And I think we recently, or certainly within the last few years, have actually got the same thing here. I think they need to show a little symbol in the corner of the screen, but it's certainly legal now to have product placement in TV shows, as long as, if there is consideration, if money changes hands, they show this little symbol in the corner of the screen which says this show was paid money by Pepsi or whoever to have a drink displayed prominently. The classic example are the stills that you often see from the American X Factor, where cups. A prominent beverage is displayed, lined up very carefully in front of all the judges.
And I guess, I'm a big Netflix fan, and I appreciate the fact that there are no adverts on there. And I don't mind paying the monthly subscription for that experience. I think that it's a better experience. So it's very interesting that these TV companies are trying to catch up with that market, because commercial breaks, they're just annoying. And eventually, you've seen the same thing over and over again. I mean, I'm thinking Jeremy Clarkson advertising Amazon's Fire TV box thing.
I remember that.
That was just on all the time, and you start to resent it, or walk out the room, or make a cup of tea and whatever. So if they're doing this, that's fantastic. But is this signalling the beginning of the end for traditional TV?
Well, that's a very good question, actually, and I think that's how we should call this one. If traditional TV is something where content is advertising funded for commercial TV, not for state-sponsored broadcasting, but for commercial TV, then if the advertising market is under threat from ad blocking, ad skipping, pirating, editing, cutting, i.e. the broadcasters can't actually control the content anymore, then I would say that actually one way to get those viewers back is to use humour and to build it into the show. Now, as you know, I used to work in telly a long time ago. And one of the things that I found out when I was working in TV was that the bumpers, those are the little... so if you're watching a show on commercial TV, say ITV or Channel 4 in the UK, the show itself is sometimes sponsored by Chorley FM, coming in your ears, like Max and Paddy. And then what would happen is, during the commercial break, at the very beginning of the break and at the end of the break, it would say, sponsored by Chorley FM, show the logo, and then it would cut, and then you would get, the 30-second commercials all lined up during the commercial break. And then as the show was due to start up again for its second segment, you would also get the same thing, a bumper. Now, these are very, very valuable because if you are fast-forwarding on VCR, or you've got a DVR and you're skipping the ads, you look for the logo of the sponsor as a cue to queue you up at the start of the second segment. So they suddenly, from being this kind of minor thing, program sponsorship, became very important in the world of the DVR for advert skipping, particularly. Now, what Saturday Night Live here are doing, which is very clever, is saying, well, look, if we merge the show into the commercial break with a skit by putting some adverts in, then people are going to be watching the commercial break to wait for a skit advert. So it could be. So I think there's some novelty value in, and what I like about this is they're using creativity to solve the problem rather than just complaining. I think
it's the right way to go. I just don't know if this is the beginning of the end, because I really think that Netflix have got the right structure, not just because of the adverts, but because it's all about the choice as well. So
we're lucky enough to have the BBC in this country, for which we are forced to pay a tax called the TV license, which gives us access to the BBC, which is advertising free. Now, that means that from a very early age, we've been exposed to ad-free content in the UK, and we've got a taste for it. And it's only when you see it as compared to commercial television that you realise how intrusive that is. Now, we also have, cable networks which broadcast to us, Sky being a great example of one where you actually pay money to get premium content. But you're also served adverts as well. Now, the Netflix model is completely commercial-free, as you said, and I think HBO and Showtime and other. Is Hulu commercial free in the States?
I've never seen it. I'm not sure.
I think that one, if you pay a premium amount per month, you get it commercial free. Otherwise, you get some ads. So you can choose.
YouTube now.
Sorry?
I think you can do that with YouTube. Right? Certainly.
You can in the United States. That's called YouTube Red, where you pay a subscription and all adverts are removed from YouTube for you.
Yeah.
But we don't have that in the UK.
It's the way forward.
Okay, well, that's interesting. So the question is commercial-supported television of this sort, where they're using creativity to advertise things, a Techtasm, or is it really going to be the future as opposed to subscription-based TV?
It's the future, I think, for broadcast TV, because they have to keep the viewers. It's not going to go away anytime soon, but they have to keep the audience. So this is definitely here to stay for broadcast TV. But I think this signals the end or the beginning of the end of broadcast TV. Anyway.
Well, interestingly enough, just as a footnote to this story, thank you for that, James. It isn't the first time that Saturday Night Live has actually done this. In fact, in 2009, Pepsi sponsored 3 sketches and played off a long-running storyline called MacGruber, which was a spoof of the 1980s TV show MacGyver, which is, so each segment hinges on a Pepsi can. So they're using high irony to put extreme product placement at the heart of a segment for money. And presumably that money is then used directly by the show for whatever, blah, blah, blah. So not an entirely new thing. I've always said there's no such thing as a new idea, but this one is certainly creative. Now, a couple of bits of stock news for you, James. The first one, shares of Microsoft Corp plunged last week after disappointing quarterly earnings, wiping away over $30 billion in market cap. I got this from MarketWatch. The stock tumbled $4 or 7.2% to close on Friday, with its biggest one-day percentage loss since it's tumbled on 9.3% on January the 27th, 2015. So Microsoft in a bit of trouble there. But then that was followed up by a double whammy, because Apple this week posted its financial results for the second quarter of fiscal 2016. And when they compared it with 2015, unit sales and revenues have been down almost across the board. Now, overall, their revenue was $50.6 billion, down $12.8 billion on the $58 billion. That doesn't add up, does it? Made in quarter 2 2015. And the net income was $10.5 billion, down 28% on the $13.6 billion income the company posted last year. So some very bad results.
Well, they had to peak.
Apple failed whale?
Right. I mean, they had to peak. The iPhone, there's only so many people in the world that can afford an iPhone. And Apple are fairly stubborn with their pricing. They're not a budget brand at all. So it's not a surprise that they've peaked, at all. So,
well, analysts do not like peaks. They like a continual, gentle climb.
So I guess we're all hoping that the Apple car will then try and revive some of their fortunes.
Or the Apple Watch 2. Who knows what it's going to be? But talking of Apple, James, I suppose, my question would be, have Apple abandoned, are they run out of ideas, or have they abandoned some key segments of their market? Now, recently, James, you carried out an interview with Tom Woodall, who worked on the Oscar-winning 2013 film Gravity with George Clooney. Now, he was part of the visual effects team that won the Oscar for Best Visual Effects. Now, while the Oscar wasn't down to him personally, he was part of that team. So James caught up with him. Let's have a listen to what they talked about.
So here on Techtasm, I'd like to introduce our first guest, Tom Woodall, my brother and video post-production extraordinaire. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thank you, James, for having me.
Oh, it's really great that you're here. So we're here today, dear listener, to talk about Apple Macs and the prosumer market. Now, for those of you who don't know, the prosumer market is the professional consumer, people who use their PCs in a kind of work life to really get something serious out of it, like, for example, video production, sound, and so forth. So, Tom, what do you use Mac prosumer models for?
So we actually built our entire facility using Mac Pros. So we fully adopt the Mac prosumer market. We have one Windows machine, which uses a doorstop, but the rest of them are all Mac Pros.
Wow. Okay. So you're really quite into the market. So a Mac Pro, I've obviously, like a few of us have done here, I've gone onto the Apple website and I've spec'd up a Mac Pro, and the prices can get quite astronomical. So can you just explain to me briefly why you would prefer to spend £6,000-7,000 on a computer when your average consumer would probably spend £500-600 on a computer? What's the main difference in the hardware?
What we use our computers for is predominantly a lot of processing power. So we have applications which will need a phenomenal amount of graphics capabilities and processing to go and get the work that we want done. So in our field, we specialize in video. We might need to layer effects. We might need to go and sort of read and write red 4K raw material, which can run up to, for a single minute, gigabytes of data, which we need to shift, and we need to go and get that done as quickly as possible in order for the client to view it.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So I guess it's purely in terms of time, right? Because if you're sitting there watching your mouse spin, you're not really productive.
Yeah, no one likes watching progress bars, least of all when the client's paying £300 an hour.
Yes, certainly. Okay, so why do people opt a Mac over, say, a PC? Because, surely they've got similar software. What's the advantage? Why have you chosen to go with a Mac?
It's actually more familiarity with the clients. In the video production world, we had Final Cut Pro in its heyday was an amazing piece of software which was adopted by the BBC, real sort of part of the fabric of post-production. Avid has been around for a long time, and that was very widely adopted. But people like Macs, people like the fact that they're associated with the creative industry. And it's more of a case of you don't want to disrupt the workflow by sort of throwing in a PC when a client is expecting a Mac.
Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense. So now here on Techtasm, we like to talk about new things. And of course, the Mac Pro is an old thing, and that's really part of the discussion here. So Apple haven't updated the Mac Pro, which is their professional model, for coming on 3 years now. So, what's Apple playing at?
I am not sure, and I'd love to go and sort of sit down with them and ask them, because you're right, the Mac Pro, the current lineup, the Dustbin model, has been released since December 2013, and that's a long time for a model which is their flagship model. You don't get a better Mac than that. It is the one that everyone goes, let's go and buy one of those to go and run all the things. And we, as a post-production company, have been building new suites based on the old Mac Pros, because we don't trust that if we buy a machine that's going to spec up to £12,000-13,000 and a component dies, a component fries, because we do push them to the limit, we don't want to have to go and throw away a £13,000 computer. We need the flexibility and also the expandability that the older Mac Pros use.
So if I'm just hearing that correctly, you get more bang for your buck getting an older Mac Pro, older than even the current generation today, than you do with the newer one.
Yeah, that is correct. We have a supplier who gets us 12-core 2012 model Mac Pros, and we spec those up with the latest NVIDIA graphics cards. We've got a number of Titan X's in there. We have 128 gig of RAM. We have USB 3 controllers. We've got everything aside from Thunderbolt. The only thing that the 2012 Mac Pros don't have is the ability to go and have Thunderbolt, and that's to do with the motherboard. We prefer that over the Dustbin ones, purely because of the expandability.
That is absolutely incredible. So what do you think that's doing to the professional market? Because Apple have long been the mainstay of the creative industry, and surely if they haven't updated their professional line for 2 years, and if you as a professional in this industry are choosing to use the older ones, what's that doing to the industry?
Everything has become a bit sort of stagnant. Yes, we're using models which are from 2012, if not earlier as well. We have machines which are from 2009, which we still use as sort of, well, basically render farms. What it's doing is it's making people sort of question Apple's ability to go and progress in this environment. They seemingly don't care because they haven't updated their models, but also they've moved away from the professional market severely with Final Cut Pro X, which again was a big sort of step in the direction of we don't really care about the creative industry anymore.
Wow. Okay. So here on Techtasm, as you may not know, is we like to kind of sum up the technology of the future as to whether or not it's a real thing or a Techtasm. A Techtasm being a phantasm, something in your head, something that looks really nice, but hey, may not happen. So I guess what I'm boiling down to is the prosumer for Apple a real or a Techtasm?
For me, it's a total Techtasm.
Really? Wow.
They're clear in their new lineup of computers, certainly with the new laptops they've been releasing. The MacBook is a classic example of not moving forward with the prosumer market. It's grossly underpowered and just looks very pretty, but really sort of unable to go and handle the task that the prosumer would want.
So if that's the case, then how long do you think it will be before the creative industry is as serious about buying PCs as they are about buying Macs?
It's a couple of years away, perhaps, unless Apple pull their finger out. They have a very sort of great design in the Mac Pro. It does look nice, but they need to go and seriously think about what components go in there and also what it means to the creative industry for them not to go and update it with the latest Intel processors or graphics cards.
All right, fantastic. Well, Tom, thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely fascinating stuff there. So some super insights from our first guest. So yay! Thank you. Well done, James. That was fantastic.
It was great. It was a lot of fun, and I look forward to the next one.
Yeah, we're going to have to do more of that stuff. That sounded really good. So good job. Well, that is it for this week, James. Our listener can find us, as always, at facebook.com/Techtasm. He can subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or Feedburner, or actually just put the show title into any podcasting app and you'll find us. You can contact us at feedback@techtasm.com and give us stars or likes, and that really helps us. We're not asking for any money. We're just interested in your shiny, happy emoticons. Now, we record every Tuesday or Wednesday. In this case, it's Wednesday at 2100 BST GMT. So watch out for next week's episode. Is it going to be Tuesday? Is it going to be Wednesday? Who knows? But either way, this is me, Sir Robin Yellow.
And me, James Woodall.
Plain old James Woodall. They're asking the question, is it real or is it just a Techtasm?